We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jeeves and Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, we've got a little while, haven't we, until the leader of the Tory party is chosen. There'll be a lot of toing and froing between now and then, I can assure you of that. But Liz Truss is currently topping the polls as the candidate that most appeals to the public. One of the reasons why, perhaps, is her push to get back to basics when it comes to policing. For example, if there's a burglar, then there should be police attendance. Yeah, all right, I'll believe that when I see it. But over in Manchester, back to basics policing seems to be making an impact. The boss there is doing things like paying attention to polished boots, pressed shirts, beard stubble gone, all the rest of it. Is that the kind of standards that we need to return to if we want policing to get better in this country? You tell me. And do you have kids, want kids, no kids, or have you got grandkids? If so, you might be interested to know that in what many are calling a landmark step, the Tavistock Clinic, the UK's gender clinic for kids, is set to close after being deemed unsafe. Is that the right decision or not? And the RMT union's deputy leader has defended living in a council house despite earning nearly £80,000 per annum. What do we think to this? Should everyone have the right to live in a council house irrespective of their salary? You tell me. We'll have all of that to come and more, but first, let's get across tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening. I'm Polly Middlehurst. The top story today. The parents of 12-year-old Archie Battersby have failed to persuade the Supreme Court to stop doctors from ending his life support treatment. They had asked justices to give them more time to carry on their fight to the UN, but the request was refused. Doctors say Archie is clinically brain dead after he went into a coma in April. His mother says she thinks he was attempting an online challenge. Well, in other news today, a man has been jailed in the first ever televised hearing inside a criminal court in England and Wales. Judge Sarah Monroe QC's comments were streamed from the Old Bailey in London this morning. She made legal history as she handed Ben Oliver a life sentence for killing his grandfather.
The sentence I pass upon you is therefore one of life imprisonment with a minimum term of 10 years and 8 months. From that term will be deducted the term you have spent on remand, which is 553 days. That deduction results in a term of 9 years and 63 days.
Conservative leadership candidates Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will face each other once again tonight, this time in Leeds. They're both taking part in the first of a series of 12 Tory hustings. Tax and spending both likely to be the main topics of contention as they take questions from party members. They'll both be hoping to secure votes before their summer tour of the UK. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak says he's the underdog of this race.
I want to be honest with people about the challenges that we face as an economy, want to be responsible in dealing with them and talk to people about my vision about how we can realise the opportunities of Brexit and keep it safe, but also help people with the cost of living and crucially tackle inflation, because that is the enemy that makes everyone poorer. I've got plans to do that, and then I do think I'm the best person to beat Keir Starmer, as some recent polling out today showed, and that's something that's really resonating with members because they want to win the next election, and I believe I'm the best person to help us do that.
And Sir Keir Starmer, mentioned there, says frontbencher Sam Tarry was sacked from the shadow cabinet because he booked media appearances without permission and made up policy on the hoof. That's after the shadow transport minister defied Sir Keir's ban on joining the picket line with striking rail workers. Train services were still disrupted again today after yesterday's strike caused travel problems. Unions have announced a further strike. That's for this weekend on Saturday and then once again on August the 13th. Sir Keir Starmer saying trade unions will always be part of the Labour movement.
I think it's quite right for trade unions to stick up for their members and to fight for their members. Of course it is. And it's their members who are really struggling under this cost of living crisis. So, of course, trade unions are right to stick up for support and negotiate on behalf of their members. And I'm fully supportive of that and working with our trade unions.
Well, workers at Britain's biggest and busiest container port have voted to strike in a dispute over pay. Members this time of the Unite Union backed industrial action at Felixstowe in Suffolk by 9 votes to 1. The union saying an offer of a 5% pay rise is to them an effective wage cut because of the soaring rate of inflation. As you've been hearing, the NHS is closing its only gender identity clinic for children and young people and replacing it with a regional network. That's after it was told that only having one provider wasn't a safe or viable long-term option. Now the contract for the Gender Identity Development Service at the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust will be brought to a close. The US economy shrank again in the last 3 months, raising fears of an approaching global recession. The Commerce Department announced today in the States that gross domestic product decreased at an annual rate of 0.9% in the second quarter after falling at an annual rate of 1.6% in the first 3 months of this year. And here, the actor Bernard Cribbins has died at the age of 93. Famous for narrating The Wombles and starring in the Railway Children movie, Doctor Who as well, and the Carry On films. His career spanned 7 decades. Bernard Cribbins. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Dewbs and Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. My panel, Pimana Assad, who's a Labour councillor, and David Curtin, who's the leader of the Heritage Party. Good evening to both of you. And you know the drill on Jeeves and Co, don't you? It's not just about us here. It's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me, gbviews at gbnews.uk is the email. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at gbnews. Some of you have been in touch already. Did you watch that court TV? We discussed it last night about whether or not that was a good idea or not. A few of you have been in touch there about the verdict that you were watching, basically saying so much for life sentencing, says Peter. It ended up pretty much at 9 years as a minimum. She might as well have sent him home in a chauffeur-driven car. That's what Pete, that's the views of Pete. See, this is the thing, isn't it, with this whole court TV? It's going to turn us all into experts. I don't envy the judges now who are going to have all of their kind of words picked over by each and every one of us. But if you did watch that, let me know your thoughts on it. And also, did you see the little row that's been brewing today as well about England, the women's football team, Lionesses? Some people now are saying that they should be renamed the Lions because apparently lionesses is sexist. Oh, get a life. If you're one of those people that sit there and think to yourself, you know, the women's football team shouldn't be lionesses, it should be lions. I wonder, I have no words, quite frankly. I just think that you need to find other things to worry about. The lionesses, very proud of them, and nothing wrong with the name, if you ask me, that is for sure. Let me know your thoughts on tonight's stories. We'll be talking about whether or not we should go back to basics when it comes to policing. Liz v. Rishi, of course, in the leadership race. Liz Truss is saying that she's going to get tough on crime. I mean, I've got to be honest, if I had £1 for every time I heard that, I'd be absolutely minted. What does it mean, and is it ever going to happen? I want to get into that. And also the Tavistock clinic, that has been ordered to shut down. I think that's jolly good. Where do you stand on it? And council houses, should anyone be able to have the right to a council house? What about if you have one and, say, your earnings change? Is there a cut-off point? Should you get to the point where if you have this amount of earnings, you're out the door and it's the next person's turn? You tell me your thoughts on that. One of my viewers already has said absolutely not. Your council house is your home. Your earnings are irrelevant. And if any of the neighbours have got nothing better to do than whinge about your earnings, then they need to get a life. There you go. That's one of my viewers' thoughts already on that topic. Let me know yours. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. So, ahead of tonight's debate with Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss has been talking tough on crime, shall we say, we'll put it mildly. She says that she would expect police forces to cut homicide, serious violence and neighbourhood crime by 20% ahead of the next election. She said, and I quote, "It's time for the police to get back to basics and spend their time investigating real crimes, not Twitter rows and hurt feelings." Someone that's actually doing this, getting back to basics, if you will, is the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police. He says his force is fast improving because of their own back-to-basics approach. This involves things like getting rid of so-called designer stubble, making sure if you've got boots on, they're smart and they're polished, making sure that you just look well. He reckons if you take care of the small things, the bigger things, they'll take care of themselves. Pemana Assad, where do you stand on all of this back-to-basics policing?
So, I mean, I wish that changing uniform and polishing your boots and tying up your hair would actually fix the trust in police at the moment. What we have and what we've seen is that Greater Manchester Police were actually put in special measures because they didn't record up to 80,000 crimes. And, you know, the police have always said that one of the reasons for this is because of Tory cuts to the police force of 20,000 over the last 12 years. Well, the Tories have said that they've reversed those cuts and they're trying to employ 20,000 police officers now. But clearly this hasn't made a difference in a lot of police forces up and down the country. And with Greater Manchester Police, I mean, he's saying he's increased, crimes by 60%, and that he's had to open up a new cell for criminals to be placed in. I wish it was like this, but I just don't think that that's what is going to get the police to change, because people really just want the police to pick up the phone and actually be able to be there when they report crimes happening to them.
Do you think, though, Pemana, that we might have to accept in this day and age that, you know, Liz Truss is basically saying things like if there's a burglary, there should be a policeman at the door? Is that really realistic, reasonable?
That should be. I mean, it was like that back in the day. When you reported a burglary, a policeman would show up. There'd be a whole investigation of your house. I'm not sure whether it would be solved and they would catch the criminals, but it would make people feel like actually the police is there and they're listening and they're trying to help me if my house is burgled. Right now, you don't get that. You call the police, they don't show up. If you, I don't know, even
catalytic crime number.
Yeah, you get a crime number, but you don't get anything else. Even catalytic converter thefts, they hardly show up for that. You know, these are sometimes really aggressive things that happen to people right outside their front doors, and the police don't turn up.
Where do you stand on it all, David?
Yeah, look, it sounds good, but I don't trust that she's going to do anything about it, because she's been in the Conservative Party that's been in power for 12 years. And I actually agree with Pemana, but one of the reasons that we have really bad policing at the moment is that they've cut the numbers of police by 20,000 over England and Wales in that time. And now they're trying to increase that again, but that's with an increased population as well. So they just want to get another 20,000 to get back to where we were, but we need more than what we had before. But there's also the case, you know, I mean, I do do agree with the Greater Manchester Police Chief there that police should be smart. They shouldn't be going out with stubbles, tattoos, with their shirts hanging out and things like that, and they shouldn't be prancing around in rainbow helmets either, and sort of doing things like we see in some cases. The Metropolitan Police are guilty of this with like Notting Hill Carnival. We've seen pictures of some police twerking with people who are actually the festival goers there. I mean, that is not going to build respect for the police at all. But another issue which we haven't mentioned yet is the whole wokery that is infested the police force, as well as like many other areas of society. And Liz Truss saying what I've been saying for 4 or 5 years. Police the streets, not our tweets. Get the police cutting down burglary, cutting down murder, cutting down fraud, etc., rather than chasing hurty tweets on the internet. But we also hear that Liz Truss wants to ban catcalling and wolf whistling, which is as woke as you can get. I mean, what's she going to do? Is she going to have the police going around arresting people for wolf whistling, even if someone likes it or not? I mean, so I think that she's sending out mixed messages there, and she doesn't really.
What do you want to disagree with? What
is wokery? What is your definition of wokery?
Well, I've just given an example. I mean, sending the police to arrest people.
Catcalling and harassment on the street is wokery.
That's not harassment. Harassment is a specific crime.
I'm sorry, did you just say that catcalling and harassment shouldn't be tackled by the police?
No, harassment should be tackled, but if someone is making a bit of banter or something, it depends on,
but it's not
how it's done.
I mean,
some people know that I disagree, because some people, it's a bit of banter, you might know someone and they accept it. For other people, it's harassment. You've got to look at the situation. But wokery is something that, the whole equality, diversion, inclusion agenda, which is everywhere. And that's actually, police spend more time focusing on that than actually on dealing with real crime like burglary.
You're saying pack it in policing things like wolf whistling, etc. You're not having any of that?
No, I'm not. I think that if woke means being inclusive, I'm all for it. I don't care if the police have rainbow colours on their cars, as long as they tackle crime. I think they can do both. I think they can be inclusive and go and do the woke stuff, quote unquote out, as well as tackling crime. I think that the Greater Manchester Police, this guy, he's got it right. He knows it's about strategy and it's about planning. It's about keeping things simple in some senses. These big, long documents, that's not what police forces need. They just need a really simple plan and targets and meeting those targets. What I don't agree with, though, is saying that the police shouldn't investigate catcalling or harassment on the street. The majority of young girls of school age in school uniform are the people that get catcalled and harassed on the street. There's research done on this, there's surveys done on this. It impacts their mental health, it impacts some of their life outcomes sometimes. People have been stalked, things have happened to young girls.
Being wolf whistled on the street impacts a girl's life outcomes?
Well, no, not fully like that. What I mean is, if some girls, if that happens to them, sometimes it continues and they get stalked and other things, that it really impacts their mental health. And I do think, and it is actually in the currently by this Conservative government, street harassment in public spaces is considered a form of gender-based violence, and the police have to do something about it.
Well, men and women.
Well, that told you, didn't it?
Well, no, actually tried to, but no, men and women can both get harassed. And of course, harassment, abuse, stalking are crimes. But actually saying she wants to criminalise the specific thing of catcalling, that's something that has been done for a long time, and it depends on the context. And that's the thing. When something is just a bit of banter in one case, but then is real harassment in another case, you have to make a distinction.
But who defines? Because one man's banter is another person's harassment.
This is where actually law gets very difficult, and you need the courts to kind of decide and make a judgment on that.
The courts to decide. So you do think the courts should decide?
Well, no. As I said, harassment is a crime. OK, but I don't think that catcalling specifically should be a crime, or wolf whistling, for example, something that people have done for ages, and some people like it. Some women
people like being catcalled
some women appreciate a wolf whistle by builders.
I don't think that's true.
Some women don't appreciate it. It's
really don't think that's true. I think you need to go and evaluate that statement.
Absolutely not. It depends on the person.
I really genuinely think
and that's something that shouldn't be a crime. But
the majority of women in this country don't.
But let's get back to the main issue.
Because then no one can hear anyone,
right, Michelle.
And then everyone's at home going, "What is this din?"
I've been told off.
You just said that no one likes being.
I don't think they do. I think the majority of women would say that they don't like it.
Someone, where have you gone? Carol, there you go. Carol says, "I wish someone would wolf whistle at me. It would make me feel good." That's what Carol says, my viewer.
Well, I think that maybe Carol should look up a campaign called Crime Not Compliment on Twitter. It's run by young women in the UK who are campaigning to make catcalling and street harassment a crime.
So that is a perfect example of wokery.
And I think people should look that up because that will give you stories and understanding of people's experiences, lived experiences.
Again, it depends on the person, and you can't generalise for everybody and say that all women feel the same. All
I think
men
we're
feel
like
the
moving
same.
away from what the story
no,
is.
right, absolutely. Well, it's an interesting discussion. But you know, getting back to where this started, but I was saying that police shouldn't be walking around with rainbow helmets, spending money painting their cars with rainbows and so on, twerking at festivals, all those kind of things don't generate respect for the police. They should be doing their main job, which is to find people who are burglars, fraudsters, thieves, murderers, assaulters, gangsters and so on, and bringing them to justice. I mean, we only have a clear-up rate of 3% for burglary. I mean, that's appalling. And, you know, it's fine for Liz Truss to say that, but what's she going to do about it? Probably not much at all.
I've got to say, lots of women are now getting in contact to say that they do like being wolf whistled. And I'm not making this up. I'm not making it up.
Thank you.
Lots of people. Karen says, I absolutely love it. Pauline says, I miss being wolf whistled at. Jeering and abusive language, though, is something else. I love a wolf whistle, says Joyce. That is coming through thick and fast. Let me ask you about these rainbow cars and stuff like that, inclusivity or whatever the terminology is. Don't you just think when a police car turns up to the scene of a serious crime and it's all decked in rainbows and all the rest of it, it just looks a bit stupid. And if that was someone that I knew had just been seriously hurt and a police car turned up, decked out in a rainbow and all the rest of it, I would think it was akin to some kind of clown car, and I would probably find it a little bit insulting.
So the majority of police cars aren't decked out in rainbow colours, that's the first thing. Second, I wouldn't care what colour the police car is as long as it turned up. I think that's the basics. The police just need to turn up when someone's reporting a crime and actually investigate and go out there and catch the criminals. That's the bottom line. I really don't care what rainbow colour, blue or whatever it is, but the majority of police cars are not in rainbow colour. And also, some police actually lack having vehicles because they said that they don't have the investment to buy police cars. So some of them actually use their own cars sometimes with a blue light.
Well, if they didn't spend so much money spraying their cars with rainbows, they'd have a bit more money to buy.
I mean, I think that needs to be investigated to see that claim, but I don't think it's true.
I can tell you the thing that's... See, we're having a good conversation here about crime, policing, priorities, etc. And the thing that's getting you all talking more than anything right now is wolf whistling. Wolf whistling, that is the thing that you're all wanting to talk to me about. Kath says, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a wolf whistle. It cheers up your day. Janine says, I've never heard such nonsense. The problem is that many young people are too delicate to cope with a wolf whistle. We take everything far too seriously these days. Again, there's just... Eileen says, Pamana needs to grow up. It's flattering, she says.
Can I ask all of them to say how old they are? Because it would be interesting to find out.
What difference does that make?
Because I think all the research that I've seen and all the data I've seen, all the surveys on catcalling and whistling in public, young women specifically have said that they don't like it. So it would be interesting to understand if older women do then.
Does it depend on who is doing the wolf whistle? So if it was David Beckham giving you a wolf whistle, or if it was like a fat old builder...
I don't think David Beckham would whistle.
I know, but that's like, I'm being tongue-in-cheek, but half devil's advocate. If it was, say, David Beckham...
But it's not, though, is it? It's when you're walking down the street, it's usually older men doing it at younger women. Yeah, doing it at younger teenage girls.
But then if you had your way and all of the coppers was busy investigating... all the old
but they're not,
that are whistling at the women, they wouldn't have any police, etc., to be doing the burglary.
But they're not, though. That's the thing. They're not, though. And I never said that they should. What I'm saying is that it should be taken seriously, that it does impact people's mental health.
The thing is, at the moment, as I've said, harassment, if someone feels they've been harassed, they can make a police report and the police can come and investigate it. But you shouldn't ban wolf whistling as a specific crime. But then, again, as the thing I do agree with you with, is that we need more police and they should be going back and doing community policing, because that has just been devastated and completely gone. It's completely gone. And most of the police is reactive at the moment rather than proactive detective trying to find out where criminals are, find out where gangs are, going in and closing them down. And so that is an issue as well.
I mean, I would love for the police to go and actually investigate harassment and stalking, but the issue is that they don't even do that properly. And so the rates of conviction for rape and for stalking and for harassment are so low as well in this country. And I think that that needs to be taken seriously because it does impact people's lives. There are women out there who've had to move into safe houses and have to change where they live just because they can't get rid of a stalker. And that's serious.
Yeah, that is serious.
Of course it's serious.
Yeah, that's serious.
Of course.
But we don't have police investigating that even. So I think before we even get to catcalling and the rest of it, I think that needs to be taken head on. And violence against women and girls should be taken as a serious, issue within police, and they should be taking that seriously. It's not unfortunate, even though it's in the plan. They aren't putting resources towards it.
Well, of course, all violent crime should be taken seriously. But the point I'm making about wokery is that we have 120,000 people who have been put on a database of non-criminal hate crime. Hate incidents, non-crime hate incidents. That's the word I was looking for. I mean, so they spent so much time investigating these non-crime hate incidents, which is a massive waste of time. A lot of them are people who have said, "Oh, I don't like what someone said on Twitter," and then they spend all their time, or a lot of time, investigating those things. So they don't
Which
have time
police force is investigating Twitter comments? I would love to know.
All of
because
them,
I get lots of abuse on Twitter, and the police always tell me they can't investigate, they can't do anything about it because no harm has been done.
Well, I mean, especially the Metropolitan Police.
I
Obviously,
don't know.
I used to be on the London Assembly and I used to question Sadiq Khan, and he was all over that. I mean, that was his thing. He set up a whole unit to investigate hurty tweets and so on and non-crime hate incidents and put £2 million into the budget. I mean, that was such a waste of money, such a waste of time. And then the serious thing is that people who haven't committed a crime find themselves on the police database rather than the police using that time, that money and those resources to go and find burglars or to find people who are perpetrating violence, as you said.
Well, there you go. Let me know your thoughts on that. I've got to say, pretty much every single person that's emailed in regarding is in favour of it. Anne says, I'm 63 and I still get the occasional wolf whistle. I'm laughing because the emails really are coming. I'm not laughing at you, Anne, the wolf whistle at 63. I'm just laughing at how many emails I'm getting just about everyone seemingly loving being wolf whistled. I'm going to find you. If you are out there and you're in the Camber Pomano, which thinks it's wrong, it's inappropriate, and the police should be there quicker than a quick thing from Quickland if someone's whistling, you tell me, gbviews at gbnews.uk. If you're out there and you are offended by wolf whistling, I'm determined to find you. So get in touch with me and let me know. David says, welcome to the UK, where everything is policed except crime. There you go. I'll leave you to ponder that one. I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk to you about a topic that I think is crucial, really, to understand if you've got kids, want kids, if you've got grandkids, etc. I'm speaking about the fact that the UK's only dedicated gender identity clinic for children and young people is to be shut down. We'll be getting into that, looking at whether it's the right decision or not. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Coming up on The Mark Steyn Show, holding Oldham Council to account tonight, the man who's been at the forefront of the fight to get justice for the victims of child grooming gangs in his hometown, Councillor Brian Hoban, will be making his case for a public inquiry into what he calls serious failings. Our statsman Jamie Jenkins will be questioning the latest official data, which raises more questions about just how effective COVID vaccines are in preventing death. And transgender teacher and journalist Debbie Hayton will be shining a light on why the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic is not fit for purpose after news it will be shut down. All those stories and more on The Mark Steyn Show tonight from 8 o'clock.
Hello there, welcome back to Jeeves and Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping me company tonight. My panel, Labour Councillor Pamana Assad and Heritage Party leader David Curtin. We've just been having a random chat about what constitutes right-wing, left-wing, far-right these days. I don't know, it's a minefield, isn't it? Well, that was what we were just talking about as we returned to the show. And of course, wolf whistling, lots of you getting in touch still, even still as I speak, about wolf whistling, basically saying you all love it. Pamana was saying basically that's because you're all a bit older, whereas Kerry, you was saying that.
I was, that's true.
And Kerry has emailed in to debunk that theory because she's only 21 and she loves it. Well, so there you go. And my whistle is actually one of the things that I am most proud of, I have to say. I've spent years fine-tuning it. It is a skill to be able to whistle properly, I would say. Anyway, you can keep letting me know your thoughts on that topic, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, let's move on, shall we? It's been announced today that the NHS is shutting down the UK's only dedicated gender identity clinic for children and young people at the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust. The clinic is going to have to shut by spring. I've got to say, this has been quite a controversial clinic, to put it mildly. It's now being criticised in an independent review led by Dr. Hilary Cass. They're now going to set up a new framework, basically, which is going to be regional centres, starting with 2. They might go up to 7 or 8 of these centres that apparently will better meet the patient's needs. Now, joining me to talk about this is Helen Joyce, who is the author of Trans When Ideology Meets Reality and Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters. Thanks for joining me, Helen. Now, to some of my viewers that might not be perhaps familiar with this, just explain why this is a big deal today.
So the way that the Gender Identity Clinic works in London is that you can be referred from anywhere in England, and the waiting lists are very long. So if a kid says that they've got gender identity issues, you know, a child who's a girl says that she identifies as a boy or vice versa, basically doctors will tend to park everything else that's happening with that kid and put the kid on the waiting list at GIDS, as the clinic is known in the Tavistock. And the kids who the Tavistock sees have many other problems. They have very high rates of autistic spectrum disorders, self-harm, depression, anxiety, all of these sorts of things. And those things aren't dealt with because there's this weird way that as soon as somebody says gender, they don't do anything else. So what Dr. Hilary Cass said was that this was really not serving the patients properly. And the second problem is that the Tavistock has this hugely ideological approach. It hasn't been doing good medicine. It hasn't been keeping records. It hasn't been doing proper research. It hasn't been investigating the reasons behind a child's trans identity. They've just been assuming that a child who says, I'm trans, is trans, and putting them on these very poorly researched pathways with puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. So all in all, I think the Tavistock can't be rescued. I think it's such a poor and such an ideologically driven service that it's brilliant that it's being closed down. And the things that Dr. Hilary Cass says about what will replace it really give me hope that something better will be offered to these children in the future.
And Helen, what would you say to any viewers that are kind of saying, look, you know, The number of trans people in this country is very, very small. This is a tiny issue. Why do the media keep focusing on issues like this? What would you say to them in terms of how important this all is?
I think there's two answers, and one is that yes, it might not be very many children who end up going down the medical pathway, but this medical pathway is one that leads to sterility, to not being able to have an orgasm as an adult, and perhaps if you're put on puberty blockers, to mental problems as well. Nobody knows the long-term impact of this particular treatment pathway because the research has been so poor. So I don't know how many children you think have to be sterilised before that's actually a serious issue. And the second thing is that because of the existence of some children or some adults as well who identify as trans, we've seen a big shift in everybody's lives. Everybody is now meant to have a gender identity, and all sorts of things that everybody uses, like single-sex services or sports that are divided between men and women or rape crisis centres, these are now meant to be based on gender identity, not actually on sex. So yes, it's a tiny number of people, but it's this kind of tail wagging the dog situation.
Okay, fascinating stuff. Helen, thank you very much for your time and for your insight on this. David Curtin, I'll come to you on this one. Where do you stand on it?
Yeah, well, I completely agree with everything that Helen said, and I was very happy when I heard that this is closing down today, or not today, but next year. But they announced it today. But then I heard that they're going to open 6 or 7 centres around the country. So they're still going to be referring people from the NHS to gender identity clinics. So I hope that they don't just do the same thing as what's been happening in the Tavistock, and they start prescribing puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones as well. I mean, because it's terrible, as Helen said there, that there's a lot of children, I think there's 5,000 who've been referred this year. And if they go onto this treatment, they're going to be, their development is going to be arrested in terms of puberty and so on. And many of them, up to 98% of them, it's just a phase they go through, or it's something else, some other mental disorder that they may have, whether it's depression or autism or something, and that you need to treat that as well. So what you were saying is a little bit hopeful, but I would question the whole notion that there is something called gender that's different to biological sex, because this was first proposed in the 1950s by a professor in the US called John Money, who did a lot of very, very unethical experiments on children, and then it was popularised by another American academic in the 1990s called Judith Butler, who wrote a book called Gender Trouble, and then it's been mainstreamed in education and then in society as a whole. But, I mean, I don't accept this premise. You're either a man or a woman or a boy or a girl, you're male or female, and you're not a person who's trapped in the wrong body.
Yeah, I mean, some people that are genuinely trans would argue against that, I'm sure. I'm conscious that nobody on this panel is trans, at least not that I know of. So I know there are some people that would say that they're genuinely trans. They would really push back against what you're saying. For me, the concern here is that I just feel that transgender is obviously a thing, but I worry so much, Pimana, about this whole kind of, to me, it seems like an overall trend that children, I mean, if you look at TikTok, this has been almost just pushed daily, well, more than daily, like hourly, to children. You can change your gender, you can change this, you don't have to be a boy, you don't have to be a girl, you can be this, that and the other and all the rest of it. And I worry about the mental health issues that are coming down the pipe for all of this, because as we've just been hearing, and anyone that reads the CAS report today will see that the long-term effects, etc., of things like puberty blockers, all these hormones that we're pumping children with, we simply just don't understand whether or not there's side effects, and even having this conversation is quite toxic. And I'll take it to your party as an example. One of the things that people will say will cost your party at the next election is the conversation around what is a woman and what is this and all the rest of it. So I think that this issue, the toxicity around the debate, the nervousness, the unease in which people feel when discussing it, I think it's a key problem.
Yeah, I agree. It is a key problem, and I think that the Labour Party has to get its act together when it comes to these issues and actually find a way forward that bridges us between what the public think and what our members think, and try and bring people together on a compromise or a way forward. But I think in terms of this specific case with this clinic, I think it's right that it's been closed, because the independent review specifically stated that it did not provide the mental health support to children that should have been there right from the start. And I think one of the positive things about this is that whilst this has now been closed, this clinic, that there will be, other clinics that will open. And it's right that there will be other clinics so that those who want to be referred can be, and that there's a space for their cases to be investigated. But I think the real good thing here is that there'll be leading children's hospitals involved in some of this, such as Great Ormond Street Hospital, who will have a say in some of the mental health support and the things that your guest Helen was talking about.
Yeah, so just to be clear, so in the spring, that's when they're talking about closing this. They're simultaneously talking about opening up another 2. So one would be in London. It'd be a partnership between Evelina and Great Ormond Street. Then you'd have one in the northwest, which is a partnership between Alderhay and Royal Manchester, I think it is, Hospital. I just worry, and I know that some people, this issue even divides opinions, because some people will say, well, if the media stopped talking about all this stuff, it would all go away. But as a mum to a child, a little boy, I think that is the wrong approach, because I think that the worst thing that can happen is that all of this stuff goes on. So people being prescribed puberty blockers without knowing the long-term effects of it. Children who say, oh, I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. That just being kind of indulged without being robustly kind of explored, challenged, checked, all the rest of it. I think if that happens under shadows, without focus, without scrutiny, we're going to end up in goodness only knows where. So I think it's absolutely vital and important that we do kind of cover these issues for the greater good of all of our children, grandchildren, whatever it is that you have. Final word to you on this, David.
Yeah, well, I was a teacher for 20 years before I got into politics. And when I finished teaching in 2016, no one really ever spoke about it up until then. But it's only really in the last 5 years or 6 years that this has just exploded. And it's exploded because you have NGOs like Stonewall and so on going into schools and actually promoting transgenderism. And they're funded by the government. We need to stop that. And then that is going to stop causing the confusion to children, and then there will be less people who need to be referred, and people who do genuinely have gender dysphoria, which is only a small number of people who are getting referred, can then get the help that they need.
Yeah, Colin, for example, is one of the people I've just been mentioning. He's just emailed in and said, but Michelle, a recent poll showed that only, what he says, 0.7% of the population is interested in trans issues. Why are you giving it so much airtime? We do not care, says Colin. Because, Colin, I think it is essential, actually, to look at what is going on when it comes to our children. If you've got children, do you have grandchildren? If your children are perhaps grown up, some of the things that these children are being bombarded with, whether it's in places like schools, it's just so much stuff these days that I worry for the long-term mental health of children. And I have to say, I can make no apology, actually, for shining a light on things, making sure that children being safeguarded and protected as much as possible, I think, is key. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address that you can get hold of us on. Going to take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about council houses. Do you think it's basically a right for all? Should anybody be able to access social housing? When you've got a house, should there be a point where you have to give it up? Say, for example, I don't know, you might get your house when you're on this job, you might progress up the ladder. Is there a cut-off point? If you start earning over X, do you have to give it back and go and get private housing? You tell me. You can email me and I'll speak to you in a couple of minutes about it.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight is Britain's COVID inquiry asking the wrong questions about our pandemic response. Professor Sunitra Gupta, co-author of the Great Barrington Declaration, is demanding to know why the efficacy of lockdowns is off the table. She'll join me live. Can we trust Rishi Sunak to tackle the Channel crisis? Political firebrand and former Brexit Party MEP Anne Widdecombe gives her verdict. Plus, there's unfiltered opinion from social media sensation Zubi and my superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello there, welcome back to Jeeves and Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping me company until 7, Labour Councillor Pimana Assad and Heritage Party leader David Curtin. Just been having a little chat in the break there just about the level of uncomfortableness that some people feel when discussing the whole kind of trans issue because they don't want to offend anyone, they don't know what to say, you know, whether or not you can even say these days that a woman has a penis and no, a man has a... I got it the wrong way around. Whether you can say a woman has a vagina and a man has a penis and all the rest of it. What I say to that is, come on, we all know facts from fiction, and more people just need to be brave enough to actually not turn a blind eye to silliness. That's what I say. Anyway, Nigel Farage joins us at 7 o'clock. Nigel, good evening to you. What have you got for us?
Good evening. We're going to debate why we're not taking defence more seriously. Dire warnings from Sir Stephen Lovegrove, our National Security Advisor, overnight. Yet no debate, it seems, in the contest to be Prime Minister. We'll look at why 8 million people are on antidepressants when new evidence suggests it's not caused by chemical imbalance. We'll ask why are we throwing back tons of fish into the English Channel when we voted Brexit to take back control of our seas. And joining me on Talking Pints, one of the great eccentrics of our times, Lempit Opik.
Sounds great. We'll see you at 7 o'clock, Nigel. Right, let's move on then, shall we? The RMT Deputy Leader, Eddie Dempsey, has been criticised this week for living in a council flat despite what many call a very healthy salary. Critics are saying that thousands of more needy people are waiting on housing lists, and that if you earn, say, £80,000 per annum, you shouldn't be in council housing. Let's cut to the chase with this. I mean, I'm using Eddie Dempsey as the hook because this has brought the conversation back to the fore, but it's not about him, it's about the concept generally. If someone's earning 80 grand a year, whoever they are is irrelevant, should they be in council property?
I think it's more complex than just about how much you're earning and whether you're living in a council house or whether you should be kicked out of the council house. The majority of people who are living in council houses have got that house after waiting for 10 to 20 years because the social housing register is so long in majority of London councils, but also outside of the country. And so you have to meet a specific criteria to even get a council house in the first place. So you have to meet that criteria in order to be able to, bid on the system for a council house to then get it and be living in it for so many years. Of course, people naturally will change jobs and sometimes their circumstances will change. They might, I think a house is a fundamental, right that people should have and that it helps people get a better start in life. But we also have to understand that there are housing association homes out there that's privately owned by a company, but they rent it out on local government rates. So the benefit rate, that's what they charge you. So it's as a subsidised rate of rent rather than the market rate of rent. But I think with this case, with the RMT union boss, I think it's, circumstances are different. Sometimes people don't have a secure income. Sometimes people don't, they can't guarantee or be able to save up for a deposit to buy a house. So it's really difficult for them to just be kicked out of their council house and to go and move into private accommodation, because it's hard. There's a cost of living crisis right now, and then to be having this conversation, I think it's tough.
Where do you stand on it? So what Pamana's saying, that if to get this house in the first place, you've got to stand in line, you've got to wait for years and years, etc. And then when you get one, your circumstances might change, which is fair enough. But if your circumstances do change, then shouldn't it only be right and fair that when you start earning 80 grand or whatever, you then move into your own funded accommodation and let someone else that isn't anywhere close to that salary, can't afford decent housing options, give that house to them?
You know what, to some extent, I do agree with Pamana that it is a little bit more complex than just looking at a specific salary. Look, I'm no fan of the RMT bosses and Eddie Dempsey, but in some cases, where do you draw the line? Do you draw the line at 80,000 where his salary is? You might not like him, but then there might be a family with a single earner living in London, which is very expensive, with 3 or 4 kids who've got a secure tenancy. Do you then say, well, because you're over 80,000 or 70,000 or 100,000, you have to leave your home? Where I would make a rule and a distinction is that you don't own any other property. So if you're living in a council house and then you go and buy something else and you do, for example, buy-to-let, you give up your council tenancy, because it's absolutely wrong that someone should own a property and still live in a council house.
I don't think you're allowed a council property if you owned a property.
No, you're not.
But there are, I mean, as I say, I was on before in the last section, I was on the London Assembly for 5 years, and I know all across London, in every borough, there are people who are illegally subletting council homes. They've got secure tenancies, but then they go and move somewhere else, and then they sublet their council home to another family or somebody, and then they're making a massive profit. And there just aren't the checks done by the local councils on people who are doing this. So this is a big problem, and that's one of the things that is contributing to the shortage of council homes. There's a couple of other things as well that might surprise you, Pamana. I am not a big fan of the whole right to buy scheme, which was a very good idea in the 1980s. And in the 1980s, a lot of people got that from Thatcher. It was brilliant for those people at that time. But 30 years down the line, we got the situation where now there's a dearth of council homes.
But that's because they didn't replenish the stock. They sold it off. And
exactly. Because they got 70% discounts. And then whatever money went into the councils, there wasn't enough then to build new council houses. And if they did, then they could have got right to buy as well. So every time people buy council houses, the council loses money. So then they stop doing it. Right to buy
is coming back as a thing now, isn't it? And I guess it is what you're saying. If you want to sell this stuff at a discount, how are you then replenishing it? And is it fair? And I'm not making it about Eddie Dempsey, by the way. I couldn't care less about him. I'm just using that as the hook because that's why it's suddenly back in the news again today. So it's not about him. It's just about the concept generally. If you've got all of these people that are not earning a lot of money, that physically, financially cannot afford deposits or anything else, they have no choice but to get social housing. Is it fair then that you have people in social housing whose circumstances have changed and they could afford? Yes, you'd have to scrimp and scrape, but so does everyone that's not in council housing in order to afford their home.
So I think that it's not just about, having a council house. It's also about family and community. People move into these homes after waiting 10 to 20 years, and then they create a home out of that, and they build a community network and connection. Their kids go to local schools, they get local jobs, and that in itself is also really important to consider.
But they could buy a private house in the same community.
If they could, I think that they should look at all the options available. But like I said, it's really difficult to save for a deposit, 1, and 2, sometimes people are not in secure employment and the future changes, which is why they believe that they should stay. And also complex family, with 1 breadwinner in the family or 2, and that kicks you up the 80k threshold, for example, should that person be removed from a council house. These are complex situations. But just to come back to the right to buy scheme, I actually think the right to buy scheme is a really good scheme. And I disagree with it not being a good scheme. And I know that it was Margaret Thatcher's idea and it's a Conservative, but I actually think it's a good scheme because it allows people to get onto the property ladder. It allows people to buy a home at a discount after having lived there for 5 to 10 years, because there's a set rule on right to buy. You have to have lived in the council home for quite some time before you get a discount on it. What I don't agree with that the scheme didn't get right is not having the funds to replace what you sell. So most councils where they've sold council homes, they haven't been able to replace it because the funding hasn't been there for them to be able to do that. Now, if councils had that, I think if the councils were able to build in replace of what they've sold, then we would have an okay situation in terms of our social housing register being reduced and people going into homes and being able to settle with their families instead of staying in emergency accommodation for more than 6 months, which is now what is happening. And as a local councillor, I see really, very, very difficult situations in my borough, for example, where kids don't have secure accommodation. They're in shared spaces that are mouldy, that aren't great, in emergency accommodation. They need council house.
But then all the more reason for the 80-odd grand a year guy then to move on and let that kid...
But then again, how can a council tell someone, for example, to move out of the house just because 2 people who are earning, I don't know what, that raises up to 80k, that you're now above the threshold and you need to leave?
You do it quite easily. You build it into the tenancy arrangement that you have, that this is your property.
But I don't think that that's fair, though, because they've waited 10 to 20 years in really bad situations to get there in the first place. Now that they've slowly starting to change their life circumstances, we're saying, well, now you need to get out. I think that there's unique situations. If you're a billionaire, you should not be living in a council house, for example. Or
well, if you
do you know what I mean? Like that's.
Why would a billionaire?
I don't know, but I'm just saying that that's ridiculous. And I agree with you, David, when you said about owning other property. And I think that it's on councils to be investigating. They do have housing enforcement officers that should be going around and checking houses of multiple occupancy and other accommodation to make sure that people aren't defrauding the system. And there are checks in place to be able to do that.
I think we have a rare...
Tony said the big crime here is the number of people in council property who are subletting it out for a profit. I think that's one of the points that David was making. Bob says we can all thank Thatcher for the current council house mess. They should never, ever, ever have been sold off. That says Bob. Again, and someone else in touch again about the sublet. He's saying, without being problematic, we saw evidence of this at the horrific Grenfell Tower tragedy. Yes, we did. That was awful. And I have to say, this subletting thing that's coming through on the email, a lot of people agreeing with you on that one. Bernard says, though, as long as people are paying their own rent, why not? Just because you earn 80 grand now, you may or may not be earning 80 grand next year. So why should you have to lose your home? Philip says, though, Michelle, I've said for years, a council house should only ever be a temporary step on the ladder. It should never be a house for life, but a starter home for young couples with very cheap rent that would allow people to save for their own home in later life. That's an interesting sentiment. Brian says one of the biggest problems in this sector is lifetime tenancies. Get rid of those and you'd fix some of the problems. Oh, there you go.
They are gone.
But some people live on the legacy ones, though, don't they?
Yeah, the legacy ones are still there, but most of the new tenancies on council homes are not lifelong.
There you go, that answered that one then. Well, that is pretty much all we've got time for. Time flies, doesn't it? The thing I like most about today's show is you're still writing in to me about whether or not you like to be wolf whistled. I'll be hearing wolf whistles in my sleep tonight, so I will. Pamana, David, thank you very much for your company. Thank you at home for yours as well. Have a great night and I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello there, my name's Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast. It is looking mostly dry over the next 24 hours or so across the UK. There will be some showers and it stays on the warm side for many of us. High pressure just about holding on for the next 24 hours. However, as we move into the weekend, that slips away. It allows weather systems to move in from the Atlantic, bringing outbreaks of rain and stronger winds to some of us as well. For the rest of Thursday evening, though, a quiet end to the day. 1 or 2 heavy showers, though, still possible across parts of Dumfries and Galloway up into the Borders region. These continuing into the early hours. But for most, a dry night, some clear spells as well. And temperatures on the mild side, 11 to 16 Celsius. So a warm start to Friday morning. The best of the sunshine first thing across central southern parts of England and Wales. Cloudy across the Pennines up into the Borders region. Some outbreaks of rain here. Plenty of sunshine initially across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Through to the afternoon, many places dry with plenty of sunny spells, though a few showers are possible across northern England, Wales, the Midlands in particular. Temperatures ranging from the low to mid-20s, highs of 26 or 27 towards the London area, so feeling warm in that sunshine. Showers through Friday evening continue for a time, but they should ease across England and Wales. However, across Northern Ireland and Scotland, we'll see weather systems move in here, bringing outbreaks of rain. Some of this could be heavy at times during the early hours, some stronger winds developing here too. But elsewhere, the dry weather holding on, and a mild night once again, temperatures 16, 17 degrees for many of us. Which means a warm start to Saturday morning. Best of the sunshine first thing across southeast England, wet across Scotland, Northern Ireland. This pushing its way southeastwards, so becoming cloudy across Wales, southwest England with some patchy rain too. But it should generally stay dry across the far southeast. The rain continues to push in through the weekend, so all of us should see some rain at some point, but temperatures staying on the warm side, highs